What happens when a powerful CEO steps into the shoes of his lowest paid employees? William Preston thought he knew everything about his company until a broken truck and a chance encounter changed everything. Can one man's journey through hardship lead to redemption for many? The engine groaned as William Preston gripped the steering wheel, the vibrations of the old truck rattling through his hands. He'd chosen this particular vehicle deliberately, a relic from his company's fleet, barely holding together. The irony wasn't lost on him. As the CEO of one of the largest logistics companies in the country, he'd built an empire on efficiency and innovation. Yet here he was, bouncing along a pothole-riddled rural road, feeling every jolt and shudder of a system he thought he understood. William had always prided himself on being a hands-on leader. He'd started from the bottom, or so he liked to tell himself. But the truth was, it had been years since he truly connected with the day-to-day realities of his business. Lately, whispers of discontent had reached his ears. Rumors of overworked drivers, unsafe conditions, and a growing disconnect between the corporate office and the people who kept the wheels turning. Literally, so he'd made a decision. Disguised in a worn flannel shirt, scuffed boots, and a cap pulled low over his eyes, William had become Bill, a new hire taking on a rural delivery route. It was supposed to be a fact-finding mission, a way to see the cracks in the system firsthand. But as the truck's engine sputtered and died on a lonely stretch of road outside Harmony Creek, William realized he might have bitten off more than he could chew. The sun was dipping low, casting shadows across the fields as William climbed out of the cab. He kicked the tire in frustration, the metallic clang echoing in the stillness. No signal on his phone, no other cars in sight. Just the endless stretch of road and the faint hum of cicadas in the distance. He grabbed his duffel bag and started walking, the weight of his situation settling heavily on his shoulders. About a mile down the road, he spotted a flickering neon sign, Harmony Creek Diner and Motel. The place looked like it had seen better days, its paint peeling and windows fogged with age. But it was the only sign of life for miles. William pushed open the door, the bell jingling overhead, and stepped into the warm, greasy air of the diner. A young woman behind the counter looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. She couldn't have been more than 30, with tired eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Her name tag read, Sarah. "You lost?" she asked, her voice tinged with a hint of amusement. "You could say that," William replied, forcing a smile. "Truck broke down a ways back. Any chance you've got a mechanic in town?" Sarah shook her head. "Closest one's in Riverton, about 20 miles east. But old Frank might be able to take a look in the morning. He's got a shop out by the highway." William sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Guess I'm stuck here for the night, then." Sarah gestured to a booth by the window. "Sit down. I'll get you some coffee. You look like you need it." As William slid into the booth, he couldn't help but notice the diner's worn charm. The cracked vinyl seats, the faded photos of the town's heyday on the walls, the faint smell of bacon and coffee that seemed to have seeped into the very fabric of the place. It was a far cry from the boardrooms and luxury hotels he was used to, but there was something oddly comforting about it. Sarah returned with a steaming mug of coffee and a slice of pie. "On the house," she said with a small smile. "You look like you've had a rough day." William thanked her, struck by her kindness. As they talked, he learned that Sarah had been working at the diner for years, ever since her husband passed away. She'd been left with nothing but debt and a mountain of bills, and the diner was the only thing keeping her afloat. "I've got dreams, you know," she said, her voice softening. "I'd love to open my own place someday, a little cafe where people can come and feel at home. But right now, it's just survival." William listened, his chest tightening with a mix of guilt and admiration. He'd spent years focused on profit margins and shareholder meetings, things that felt so distant now. But here was someone who embodied the very essence of resilience. And yet her struggles were a stark reminder of the people his company had failed, people like Sarah, who deserved better. As the night wore on, William found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. He told Sarah about his own struggles, carefully omitting his true identity, and shared stories of his early days in the business. He also faced his challenges, and so he wasn't making things up. But he felt good about being close to this reality, so far from what he knew. When Sarah offered him a room at the motel for the night, William accepted gratefully. As he lay in the narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that this detour was more than just a breakdown. It was the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. Outside, the cicadas hummed, and the stars stretched endlessly above the quiet town of Harmony Creek. William closed his eyes, the weight of the day pulling him into a restless sleep. Tomorrow he'd figure out how to fix the truck, but deep down he knew the real repairs would take much longer. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the motel room, casting a pale golden light across the worn carpet. William woke to the sound of distant chatter and the clatter of dishes from the diner next door. For a moment he forgot where he was, the unfamiliar surroundings pulling him out of his usual routine. Then it all came rushing back. The broken truck, the diner, Sarah. He dressed quickly, his mind already racing with the day's tasks. He needed to get the truck fixed, but more than that, he needed to understand what had brought him here. The conversation with Sarah the night before had left him unsettled, her words echoing in his mind like a refrain he couldn't shake. When he stepped into the diner, Sarah was behind the counter, her hands busy with a coffee pot. She looked up and smiled, though the shadows under her eyes hinted at another sleepless night. "Morning," she said, pouring him a cup without asking. "Frank's on his way. He'll take a look at your truck. But don't get your hopes up. That old thing might be beyond saving." William chuckled, though the thought of being stranded indefinitely sent a pang of anxiety through him. "Thanks. And thanks for the pie last night. It was exactly what I needed." Sarah shrugged, but her smile warmed. "It's what we do around here. Look out for each other." As William sipped his coffee, he found himself watching her, the way she moved with practiced efficiency, the way she greeted every customer by name, the way she carried herself with a quiet strength that belied her struggles. He wanted to know more about her, about the life she'd built in this small town. When Frank arrived, a grizzled man with grease-stained hands and a no-nonsense attitude, William followed him out to the truck. The mechanic poked around under the hood, muttering to himself while William leaned against the side of the vehicle, trying to mask his impatience. "She's seen better days," Frank said finally, wiping his hands on a rag. "I can patch her up enough to get you to Riverton, but you're going to need a real mechanic to get her back on the road for good." William nodded, though the delay grated on him. He wasn't used to being at the mercy of others, and the helplessness gnawed at him. But as he went back to the diner, he realized this might be an opportunity, a chance to dig deeper into the life he'd only glimpsed the night before. Sarah was clearing tables when he returned, her movements quick and efficient. William hesitated, then grabbed a rag and began helping her wipe down the counters. She raised an eyebrow but didn't stop him. "You don't have to do that," she said after a moment. "I know," William replied, "but I want to." They worked in silence for a while, the rhythm of the diner settling around them like a familiar song. When the breakfast rush died down, Sarah gestured for William to join her in a booth. She slid a plate of eggs and toast across the table, and he realized he hadn't eaten since the night before. As they ate, Sarah began to open up. She told him about her husband, a truck driver who'd worked long hours to provide for their family. He'd been fired unexpectedly, accused of a mistake that wasn't his fault, and the stress had taken its toll. He'd passed away just a year later, leaving Sarah to pick up the pieces. "He worked for Summit Freight," she said, her voice steady but laced with bitterness. "They didn't care about him, just another number to them." William's stomach churned, though he kept his expression neutral. He knew the company had its flaws, but hearing it from someone who'd been directly affected was a gut punch. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That shouldn't have happened." Sarah shrugged, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "It is what it is. I just wish things had been different." William wanted to tell her the truth, to reveal who he was, and promise to make things right. But he couldn't, not yet. Instead, he asked about her dreams, about the cafe she'd mentioned the night before. Her face lit up as she described her vision, a cozy space with mismatched chairs and a menu filled with comfort food. "It's probably just a pipe dream," she admitted, "but it keeps me going, you know." William nodded, though his mind was already racing. He thought about the resources at his disposal, the changes he could make if he had the courage. But more than that, he thought about Sarah, her resilience, her kindness, her quiet determination. She deserved more than just survival. Later that afternoon, Sarah's brother, David, stopped by the diner. He was a truck driver like Sarah's late husband, and his presence was a stark reminder of the world William had been trying to understand. David was in his early 40s, with a weathered face and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. William introduced himself as Bill, the alias he'd been using, and struck up a conversation. David was hesitant at first, but soon he was sharing stories of life on the road, the long hours, the poor pay, the constant pressure to meet impossible deadlines. "It's not just a job," David said, his voice tinged with frustration. "It's the way they treat us, like we're disposable. You make one mistake and you're out. No second chance." William listened, his stomach twisting with every word. He thought about the policies he'd signed off on, the decisions he'd made from the comfort of his office. He'd never considered the human cost. Not really. When David left, William sat in silence, his coffee gone cold. Sarah watched him from across the counter, her brow furrowed. "You okay?" she asked. William looked up, meeting her gaze. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just keep thinking about what you and David said, about how hard it is for people like you. It's not right." Sarah sighed, leaning against the counter. "It's the way things are. Doesn't make it fair. But what can you do?" William's jaw tightened. "Maybe there's something I can do." That night, William lay awake in his motel room, the weight of his thoughts keeping sleep at bay. He thought about the people who'd been let down by his company, the policies he'd implemented, and the profits he'd prioritized over people. And he thought about the man he'd become, someone so disconnected from the world he was supposed to serve. By morning, he'd made a decision. He found Sarah at the diner, her hands busy with the morning prep. She looked up as he entered, her expression softening when she saw the determination in his eyes. "I need to tell you something," William said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Sarah set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables and wiped her hands on her apron. "Okay," she said slowly. "What is it?" William took a deep breath, the words heavy on his tongue. "I'm not who you think I am. My name isn't Bill. It's William Preston." Sarah's eyes widened, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "As in the CEO of Summit Freight?" William nodded, bracing himself for her reaction. "Yes, I came here to see what life was like for our drivers, for people like you. And what I've seen, it's changed me." For a moment, Sarah just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "You've got to be kidding me." "I'm not," William said, his voice earnest. "I know I don't deserve your trust, but I want to make things right, starting with you." He explained his plan, to offer her a remote job with the company, one that would give her the stability and opportunities she deserved. He also promised to overhaul the company's policies, starting with fairer treatment for drivers and better support for their families. Sarah listened in silence, her arms crossed over her chest. When he finished, she shook her head. "You think this fixes everything? A job and a few policy changes?" "No," William admitted, "but it's a start, and I'm not going to stop until I've made things right." Sarah studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay, I'll take the job. But don't think this means I trust you." William smiled, though his heart ached with the weight of her words. "I don't expect you to, but I'm going to earn it." As he left the diner, the morning sun warming his face, he felt like he was finally heading in the right direction. The drive back to the city was a blur of highways and rest stops, the old truck groaning under the strain of the journey. William's mind, however, was far from the road. He replayed his conversation with Sarah over and over, her words a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. She'd agreed to his offer, but her skepticism had been palpable. He couldn't blame her. Trust wasn't something he could buy. It had to be earned. When he finally arrived at the corporate office, the gleaming glass building felt a million miles away. The polished floors, the hushed whispers of employees, the scent of expensive coffee. It all seemed disconnected from the world he just left behind. He walked through the lobby with a newfound purpose, ignoring the curious glances of his staff. His assistant, Emily Carter, was waiting for him in his office, her usual composure slipping as she took in his disheveled appearance. "Mr. Preston, are you—" "I'm fine," William interrupted, his tone sharper than he intended. He softened his voice. "Call an emergency board meeting and get me the latest reports on driver retention, payroll, and employee grievances." Emily blinked, clearly thrown by the urgency in his voice. "Right away, sir." As she hurried out of the room, William sank into his chair, the weight of the past few days pressing down on him. He opened his laptop and began drafting a proposal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The words came easily, fueled by the faces he'd seen in Harmony Creek. Sarah, David, the countless others who'd been let down by his company. The board meeting was tense. William stood at the head of the table, his proposal projected on the screen behind him. He outlined his plan, increased wages for drivers, better benefits, a revamped grievance system, and a commitment to reinvesting profits into improving working conditions. The room was silent when he finished, the board members exchanging uneasy glances. Finally, one of them spoke up. "This is ambitious, William, but the cost is necessary," William interrupted, his voice firm. "We've been prioritizing profits over people for too long. It's time to change that." The debate that followed was heated, but William held his ground. He spoke of Sarah, of her husband, of the countless employees who'd been failed by the company. He spoke of the moral obligation they had to do better. And slowly, reluctantly, the board agreed. Over the next few weeks, William threw himself into implementing the changes. He met with drivers, listened to their concerns, and worked tirelessly to address them. The company's culture began to shift, slowly but surely, as employees started to believe that their voices mattered. Sarah's remote job began, and though she was initially hesitant, she quickly proved herself capable and dedicated. William occasionally called her, checking in on how things were going. Each time he heard her voice, he was reminded of why he had started all of this. Months later, Sarah called William. "I'm in the city," she said, her voice slightly hesitant. "I wanted to stop by the office, if that's okay." William felt a spark of excitement. "Great, come on up. I'll be here." When Sarah walked into William's top-floor office, she brought with her the atmosphere of Harmony Creek, a sense of calm and authenticity that stood in stark contrast to the corporate world around her. But there was a quiet confidence in her eyes that made William smile. "Sarah," he said, standing, "what are you doing here?" She crossed her arms, her expression serious. "I wanted to see this place for myself. See if the changes you promised are real." William gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Have a seat. I'll show you everything." For the next hour, William walked Sarah through the new policies, the employee feedback system, the plans for driver support programs. She listened intently, asking sharp questions that proved she'd done her homework. When he finished, there was a short silence. "It sounds good," Sarah finally said. "Really good." William knew she didn't fully trust him yet, but it was a step. "Still a lot of work to do," he said. "This is just the beginning." Sarah nodded. "I know, but thank you, William." William leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Don't thank me yet. There's still a lot of work to do." The road ahead was long, and there would undoubtedly be challenges along the way. But as the city lights twinkled outside his window, William thought about the miles he traveled, not just on the road, but within himself. He'd started this journey as a man disconnected from the world he was supposed to serve. But now, thanks to a broken-down truck and a chance encounter in a small town, he was finally beginning to understand.